Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader of the synagogue came in and knelt before him, saying, My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she said to herself, If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well. Jesus turned and seeing her said, Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well. And instantly the woman was made well. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, Go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout that district. The word of the Lord. Some people were born under a wandering star. And I've kind of pictured Abram that way. I can see him walking to the edge of the pasture after daily work was done and step up on the bottom rail of the fence and looking out toward the horizon and wondering, what's out there? Yes, he had inherited his father's farm, and yes, his life was comfortable, but that's all it was. He couldn't help but think that there was more to it than just this. And so the word of the Lord that came to him may have been the best news he could ever hear. Go, it said. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house, and I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. Some of you may remember a somewhat familiar story about a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed, but one day he was shooting for some food, and up through the ground came a bubbling crude. Oil, that is. Black gold. Texas tea. Some of you remember it well. Some of the younger members say, what in the world is it? But for some reason, when I read that part of Abram's story, I thought of Jed Clampett running back into that little cabin where he lived, telling Granny the good news. I can see Abram doing the same thing. I can see him the next morning sitting up high, set on the wagon with Sarai beside him, and his nephew Lot sitting in the back seat as they ride away from the house. He's happy, as if he was fully alive for the first time ever, as if overnight his world had gone from black and white to color. Was that what it was like for Matthew, the tax collector? He was sitting there at his tax booth, feeling the resentment of every Israelite who stepped up and put down a hard-earned coin to pay their taxes to Rome. When all of a sudden Jesus walked up, was it how Jesus looked at him? Was it how he said something to him? Follow me. And for reasons Matthew probably didn't even understand himself, he got up from his tax collector's booth and followed him. And something happened as he did. He felt the freedom he had never felt before. And he stepped out into a brand new world, a world that had gone from black and white to color. Now, I'm having to fill in some of the blanks here. I don't know how Abram felt about his call or Matthew felt about his, but I know what can happen to your life when you open the door and let God in. How divine light can fill up the darkened corners of your life and turn things from black and white into color. Jesus lit up one life after another. He called Matthew to follow him, ate a meal with sinners and tax collectors. He healed a woman. He raised a man's dead daughter. And that was all in a day's work for him. But he brought people back to life and health and back into a relationship with God and with each other. It was as if everywhere he went, the world changed from black and white to color. But not everybody was happy about that. The Pharisees preferred a world, I guess I got behind. They preferred a world where everything was black and white. They saw Jesus eating with the wrong crowd and asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" In their black and white world, that just wasn't done. The world was divided into those who were sinners and those who were righteous, and the two had nothing to do with each other. So for Jesus to sit down and eat with obviously unholy people was inconceivable. Why did he do it? Didn't he know that God wanted his people to be holy? Didn't he know that true holiness required separating yourself from everything that was unclean? That's what the word Pharisee means, to separate. And that's why the Pharisees wore that like a badge of honor. But Jesus wasn't about separating people. He was in there mixing with the tax collectors and the sinners as if he had no fear of contamination. Why does your teacher eat with those people? They asked the disciples. And Jesus responds to them, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but the sinners." Can you imagine how hard that was for the Pharisees to hear? Well, maybe you can, because, in a church, the church can put a lot of emphasis on purity. We insist that being Christian means living a certain kind of life, a life free from the influences of a sinful world. Stands to reason, though, that those who are the best Christians are the ones among us who do the best job of keeping themselves from those influences, the ones who don't cuss or don't smoke or don't drink or don't gamble, just to name a few. And there's plenty of folks that will tell you all about it. But do you see how quickly Christianity can become a religion of just keeping rules? Pretty soon we've forgotten that we were saved by grace. I'm a better Christian than she is because I not only come to church, I teach children Sunday school. Well, I'm a better Christian than he is because I have a chrome decal of a fish on my car. Well, I'm a better Christian than he is. You won't see me cutting my grass on Sunday. Can you imagine how all of those would have made Jesus feel? Might have wanted to make him want to jump off the top of the temple. Listen, he said, I didn't come to pat you on the back for being good Christians, for keeping yourself free from the sins of the world. There are people all around you who are drowning in sin. Won't you stick a hand out to help them? You're afraid you might get dirty. Where did they learn that kind of behavior? From the Pharisees. The ones who were so concerned about keeping the rules of the righteousness, about keeping themselves separated from a sinful world. And what did Jesus say to them? Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Jesus might say, I've not come from the righteous who are standing by the riverbank, pointing fingers and saying, I told you so, but for the sinners who are going down for the third time, gasping for air, and who need all the help they can get. And then Jesus shows us what that kind of mercy looks like. While he's sitting there eating with tax collectors and sinners, a man comes to help Jesus, begging for his help. His daughter has died, and he thinks Jesus can help. In Mark's version of the story, the man is a leader of the synagogue. And if it's the same man in Matthew's story, it's remarkable that he comes to Jesus, because where's Jesus? He's in the home of a tax collector. The leader of the synagogue who goes into that house would become unclean. But he does so because he's desperate. And if you're desperate enough, you'll do anything to try to get some help. And in a moment like that, none of your self-called righteousness is as important as getting your little girl back. Jesus seems perfectly willing to break the laws of the day for the sake of love. As Jesus is on his way to heal the little girl, he's approached by a woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years. That, of course, made her ceremonially unclean. She couldn't enter the synagogue as long as her impurity continued. And anyone who touched her or anything she had touched would be considered unclean. And so she sneaks up behind Jesus. If I can only touch his robe, he won't even have to know about it. But he did know about it. And instead of saying, what have you done to me, you sinful woman? You've made me unclean. He turns to her and says, take heart. Your faith has made you well. And just like that, she's healed. And in an instant, her world is changed from black and white to color. When Jesus got to the leader's house, he sent everyone else away until it was just him and the body of that poor little girl. She lay there on a bed, black and white, like a black and white drawing, a shadow of what she had been before. And Jesus was moved with compassion. Now, according to the law, according to Numbers chapter 19, anyone who touched a dead body would be unclean for 7 days. Jesus knew that, but it didn't stop him. He reached out to the girl's hand, and she changed from being black and white to color. If anybody else had been there, they might have seen that as far as he was concerned, even this one life was more important than all those rules. Strange things can happen when you let God into your life. Things that once seemed so important to you might not seem so important anymore. You might give up the family farm, pack up all your belongings, head out for an unknown country like Abram did. You might come to an understanding that it's grace and not keeping the commandments that saves you, as Paul did. You might look up from your day job to find Jesus looking back at you with love and understanding, like Matthew did. You might discover, as all these people did, that when you let God into your life, things change. His light reaches into all the dark and dusty corners, fills you with unlimited possibility, and sometimes you find that your world is changing from black and white to color. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Now let us stand together and sing